James Caan. What do you think you learned from him?
A lot. I love James Caan. He was a mentor to me. I mean, I could go on and on. I worked with the guy for 5 years, always miserable, but always in a great mood. Like that guy who always has to, even when things are really good, he'll find a way to make it, to make it dramatic or make it, stir it up a bit. But tremendously helpful, always had time for me, always had time for anybody on set. He never showed up and was like aloof. He was always like talking to people, whether it's the camera guys or the, or messing with somebody over here. He's like, Josh, go over here, you tell him the story about that. He's like that guy. Just an absolute legend.
And he'd give you notes in between takes.
Yeah, so again, this was early in my career. I was pretty green. I had just come off All My Children and trying to prove myself in the primetime world. And you always knew when Jimmy didn't like your performance, when he'd be like, hey, come over here for a minute, kid, will you? And I'm like, oh God, here we go. He'd be like, just relax, you're working, you're trying too hard. You gotta just let the lines come. Try it again. Just don't care so much. Just go. Okay, do it. Or he'd give you whatever. He'd like literally take you aside and give you notes. Normally you don't do that with actors, but with a guy like James Caan and a young guy like me, I was like, thank you very much. I needed it, and I'm glad that he took the time to do it.
Didn't he give you family advice too?
Oh, I remember him saying something like, you can learn a lot from me, what to do and what not to do. He was a wild man in the 80s. He'd probably be the first one to admit, he let it get away from him a little bit, but never lost that fire, and I love that about him.
How about when you asked him if he'd ever worked with Brando?
Yeah, that was one of my dumbest moves. We were sitting around waiting during a setup of some sort, and we're talking about movies, and I asked him if he'd ever worked with Brando, and he's like, "What, are you kidding me?" I was like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "I was in the Godfather, you dumbass." I was like, "Oh my God, Sonny Corleone, I'm so sorry." Yes, of course because I hadn't put the two together that he clearly had worked with Brando.